This is The Micro Effect.
The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
There was a mighty nation, blessed above all of creation. It was a rare and precious pearl, conceived in faith and liberty, home of the brave, land of the free. It was the envy of the world. But this shining city on a hill has turned from the Creator's will and let evil take control. Now the reckless men who lead them want to strip away their freedom and to steal their very soul. Now it's smoke and mirrors, switching bait, criticize and confiscate and let the guilty walk away. In this once righteous, godly nation, in the halls of education, they forbid a child to pray. They say we need to spread the wealth. They pretend to guard the health of the feeble and the poor, while the hand they hold behind their backs confuses and conceals the fact that the wolf is at the door. There's an unseen hand that pulls the string. It makes his little puppets dance to every song he sings as the night rolls in on a rising tide.
Well, good morning to Connecting the Dots. It's September 11th, 2018, and this morning we have two guests on our show. We'll break the show into two parts. The first hour will be with Trevor Loudon, and we will be talking about the enemies within the Republic. And I have known Trevor for some years now. I met him on, I think, his first trip to Montana, and I'm going to say it was about close to 8 years ago, and he came to Montana, and he was promoting at that time his book, Barack Obama and the Enemies Within. And that book outlined all the appointees and all the people that were behind Obama and part of his growing up and the influences on his life and why Barack Obama was a communist. And I firmly believe that to be the case. And Trevor, since then, has worked on several other projects. In fact, he's got one underway right now. But he worked on another book called The Enemies Within, and it talked about our various elected officials in Congress and in the U.S. Senate, and how many of them could not pass an FBI security check because of so many details in their past that were so bad. And now he's working on a new project that will amplify on that, and it also will focus on Antifa and the different groups who are bringing communism to America in a big way. And Trevor, I'm going to read the back of this DVD that you have called The Enemies Within, which incidentally I would recommend our listeners to please go to the website and buy that DVD. I think you'll find it extremely interesting and very enlightening. And the back panel of that says, Enemies Within zooms in on the best-kept secret of modern politics. Almost no one is aware of the fact that fewer than 20,000 U.S. communists, socialists, and extreme progressives are able to influence the politicians and even write the laws that control the lives of over 300 million Americans. First, they infiltrated the unions, gaining full control in 1995. Next, they used their bought and paid for lackeys in the House of Representatives and the Senate to ram through a radical communist union agenda. Purported Democrat policies such as green jobs the insane New START treaty with our so-called partner Russia, socialization of student loans, massive easing of voting qualifications, and consequent vote fraud bonanza, mass educational indoctrination, and the gutting of the U.S. military. While these enemies of America and their Islamic allies grow bolder and more aggressive, the Democratic Party is wrecking both the U.S. military and the economic prosperity needed to sustain it. President Reagan's doctrine of peace through strength has been abandoned. If America loses its strength, what will happen to our peace? How many more Americans will needlessly die because the enemies within that were elected have betrayed them? And that's a great lead-in. Trevor, welcome to the radio show. It's been a few months since I saw you at the Red Pill Expo, where you were one of the presenters and did a dynamite job there, as you always do. Welcome to the show. Trevor, are you on the call? Hello?
There was a mighty nation, blessed above all of creation. It was a rare and precious pearl, conceived in faith and liberty, home of the brave, land of the free. It was the envy of the world. But this shining city on a hill has turned from the Creator's will and let evil take control. Now the reckless men.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Hampel. I apologize, but for some reason we don't have Trevor Loudon on the call yet, and I'm in the process of trying to contact him and see if for some reason he got the wrong call-in number or something. So we'll continue to work on that. Joe, if you will just maybe go to one of our commercial breaks, and I will cut in just as soon as we can get Trevor on the call.
Now you can feel that squeaky clean sensation like none other with Vitamer toothpaste and mouthwash. Vitamer toothpaste and mouthwash is a unique natural formula not found in any other oral care products. With a gentle combination of zinc, folic acid, myrrh, and clove oil, Vitamer effectively whitens teeth, removes plaque, and freshens breath, and it does it naturally without any harmful chemicals. Visit us online at Vitamer.com. That's VITAMYR.com. Or call us today to place your order at 1-888-558-8482. That's 1-888-558-8482. Keep your teeth and gums healthy with Vitamer toothpaste and mouthwash. Vitamer, nature's answer to healthy teeth and gums. And remember, it's all completely natural. Available at participating health food stores nationwide.
Olive's Auto Parts, 1135 Michigan Avenue in Orofino. Olive's Guns and Ammunitions, gunsmithing, accessories, scopes by Night Force, new and used. Olive's Chainsaws, sales and service. That's Olive's Auto Parts at 800-592-6832. That once again, 800-592-6832.
Thank you so much for listening to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. Dan will be back shortly. In the meantime, Dan wanted me to speak to you about connecting your own dots when it comes to being prepared for any situation. As we have all observed in the news, natural disasters are occurring at a record pace across the United States and the world. Hurricanes and floods, earthquakes, and wildfires burning out of control. You could potentially have a bullseye on your own town or country. For that reason, Dan has partnered with Patriot Prepared to bring you a full line of products to provide the insurance that you need for any unexpected disaster. Whether it's our full line of high-quality freeze-dried, storable food, our own industry-leading water filtration products, you can find it all by visiting patriotprepared.com/dots. It makes good sense to be prepared. That's patriotprepared.com/dots.
Whew, nice shooting. Hey, that's a sweet AK-47 chest rig. Is that multicam?
Yep, got it from StrikeHardGear.com.
Strike what?
StrikeHardGear.com.
Set your sights on StrikeHardGear.com. Tough, tactical gear for your Soviet-style weapon that's made in the USA. Affordable, plus a no-questions-asked 30-day money-back guarantee and lifetime replacement warranty. StrikeHardGear.com. Go ahead, pull the trigger.
This is the Micro Effect.
The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
There was a mighty nation, blessed above all of creation. It was a rare and precious pearl, conceived in faith and liberty, home of the brave, land of the free. It was the envy of the world. But this shining city on a hill has turned from the Creator's will and let evil take control. Now the reckless men who lead them want to strip away their freedom and to steal their very soul. Now it's smoke and mirrors, switching bait, criticize and confiscate and let the guilty walk away. In this once righteous, godly nation, in the halls of education, they forbid a child to pray.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel, and we broke our program today into two parts. The first hour was with Trevor Loudon, and the second hour will be with Mr. Chris Kortlander, and we will be talking about the enemies within the Republic and how some of the things that are happening in this country, a lot of the things that are happening in this country, have a great deal to do with a political agenda that is very anti-American. It is an agenda that is based on transitioning the United States of America, as Barack Obama famously said. It is a fundamental transformation of America. And that transformation is into a Marxist system that's controlled by a lot of forces that would see the end of the American Republican form of government and free choice, and that is what we are covering today. Trevor, are you on the call? I tried to text the number to you, and hopefully you're on the call. I gave a great lead-in earlier to you, and I'm hoping that you are on the call because we've got a great subject to cover this morning, and that is the enemies within.
Yes, I'm certainly here, Dan. How are you?
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I'm glad to have you on. You and I talked last weekend, or last week, I guess, about the forces that are reshaping our political process, and your movie, Enemies Within, and your books, The Enemy Within, and also Barack Obama and the Enemies Within. And now you've got a new project underway, and you are exposing the people who are enemies of the American constitutional Republican form of government. And one of those that we're going to talk about today, because we feel like it's very important with the upcoming elections, that people know who they're voting for. And one of the people that you identified of the 19 senators with very, very questionable backgrounds and strong ties to some of these various Marxist and socialist groups is Senator Jon Tester. And Senator Tester, in the second hour, will be talking with Chris Kortlander about some of the things that happened on voting improprieties in the Indian reservations and some of the things that changed the administration, changed our legislative makeup because the Senate basically went from being controlled by the Republicans to being controlled by the Democrats with that one election, and it was an election 3,500, a difference in 3,500 votes, and that far and away the biggest margin of that was in the Indian reservations in Montana. So anyway, we'll get to that in the second hour. Trevor, I want to welcome you to the show. You were at the Red Pill Expo. You're going to be doing a tour of Montana next month, and I think this is very timely because we need to let Americans know that there's some pretty questionable background information on Senator Jon Tester, and I want you to tell our listeners some of the things that you've discovered.
Yes, well, Senator Tester is running neck and neck, I think, right now with the Republican. And he portrays himself as this, down-home Montanan. He's a rancher. He's lost a couple of fingers working on the farm. He's just a good old boy, That's the impression he will try and give you. But he votes 85 to 90% with the hard left in Congress. And he has been completely in bed with the left ever since he's been in office. I'll just read a little thing that the Communist Party said about Jon Tester when he first stood for the U.S. Senate in 2006. He said, this is what the Communist Party said: in Montana, State Senator Jon Tester, who has a very strong labor, environment and peace record, won a landslide victory in the U.S. Senate primary over a Democratic Leadership Council candidate. So when the Communist Party singles you out and says you have a very strong labor, environment, and peace record, that means they regard you as a leftist, a far leftist, because the peace movement, which they control, is all about gutting the U.S. military. The environmental movement, which they control, is all about locking up land and destroying American businesses' ability to utilize that land, to shut down ranching, etc. And as a very strong labor record, it means he's pro-union. And the unions are all now controlled by the Marxists. So that was a very clear signal by the Communist Party that they regarded Tester as someone they could trust and someone they could support. And that record has continued through his terms in Congress.
Okay, well, I know that your books and your DVD talked about how so many of these people could not pass an FBI security check. And I know that is one of the criteria that you use in evaluating whether these people ought to be on some of these very high security congressional committees. Would you talk about Jon Tester's committee assignments and some of the things that you see as being alarming, and why American voters should think very long and hard, especially Montana voters, obviously, before they give Jon Tester the green light?
Well, look, Tester has been involved in several committees through the years. He's on the his main responsibility in the Democratic Party is as a member of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. Now, that means running the campaigns for other Democratic senators. So this is a very trusted position within the Democratic Party machine. And he has used his agricultural committee posts to promote trade with Cuba. Now, a lot of Montana farmers would say, you know, he's been to Cuba, he's been actively involved in legislation opening up trade with Cuba, which was banned back in the 1960s. And a lot of farmers in Montana would say that's great, you know, that we can get another market, we can sell more crops to Cuba, etc. Well, there's a problem. The Cubans were banned from trading in this country for a number of reasons. One of them was the fact that several Cuban agents were caught back in the early 60s with a room full of dynamite that they were going to use to blow up Macy's on New Year's Eve in New York, which would have probably killed several hundred people, to put it mildly. The Cubans have been sending drugs. They are very heavily involved in the illicit drug trade from South America. They've been sending drugs and spies and terrorists into your country for decades. Many of the Black Lives Matter activists have Cuban connections. The Cubans were apparently also involved in the LA riots of 1992, which I believe killed about 30 people. So, and they have been, and the big thing that's held the Cuban Revolution back is the fact that they were not allowed to trade with the United States. It was a massive trade embargo. And they have been working diligently for over 30 years to try and get that embargo lifted. And Senator Tester has played a major role in making that happen. So basically, he's been doing Fidel Castro's dirty work for him. And whether he realizes it or not, by doing that, he's going to enable more drugs to be smuggled into this country, more terrorists to come to America, and more spies. So Jon Tester is basically working not in the interests of Montanan farmers, but primarily in the interest of a communist dictatorship in the Caribbean, which has done everything it can to disrupt and create havoc in this country.
Okay, and then, one of the things that I think most Americans are aware of the Obama affinity to open up free trade with communist countries pretty much worldwide. And quite frankly, progressives in the Republican Party have been part of that process too. So it's not like
Absolutely.
The Republicans are lily white. There's a number of progressives in that party that, frankly, are part of the same problem as the Democrats who are so liberal. But Barack Obama really opened that whole process up with his presidency, and his background was pretty gruesome. You certainly exposed much of that as well. Isn't it true that on Obama's policies that Jon Tester was one of the strongest supporters and promoters of Obama's policies to do these various things?
Yeah, look, Jon Tester was a big supporter of Obamacare. He's been a big supporter of the liberalization of trade with the communist countries. And Jon Tester is a full-on committed supporter of single-payer health care, which is what Obama really wanted. And by single-payer, I mean that the government pays all of the health care bills. And a lot of people say, well, that's really great. You know, I don't have to buy health insurance, and I don't have, it takes a big hassle off my plate. But what they don't realize is that these people want to model their health care on the Cuban communist system. That is explicitly what is aimed at here. Now, I I come from a country that's also had single payer, and I just want to make it very clear. Americans need to understand that they have the best healthcare system in the world right now. Now, I understand that it's got huge problems because of far too much government intervention. But just think about this. Just think about this one little thing for a minute on single payer. If you're in a free market healthcare system, and I know America's not free market, but at least it still has elements of the free market. You know, you have a relationship with your doctor, and your doctor has a vested interest in keeping you healthy and living as long as possible, because then you can give him lots of money and he can take more holidays. You know, that's and he can build a bigger house. You know, in a free enterprise system, your doctor has an interest in keeping you healthy and living as long as possible. In a single-payer system where the government pays the bills, this is the problem. Health needs are unlimited, but the government budget will be fixed. It may be a very big budget, but it's still going to be fixed, X billion dollars a year, X trillion dollars a year, whatever it is. But health needs are unlimited. Now just think about this example. Say if you think about Christchurch Public Hospital in New Zealand, where I come from. You think about the oncology department, the cancer department, and they're going to have a budget for chemotherapy of, say, $20 million a year. Well, at the end of every financial year, things start to get tight. And you imagine they've got a 7-year-old girl in one bed who has leukemia. Now, they can give her $100,000 worth of treatment, save her life. She may grow up, get married, have children, get a job, pay taxes. They've got a 75-year-old guy in the other bed who has prostate cancer. They can give him $100,000 worth of chemotherapy, and he may survive another 2, 3, maybe even 5 years. He won't pay any taxes. He'll just be a drain on the system. It's the end of the financial year. They're running out of money. They can't afford to treat both. What do you think is going to happen?
Sure, absolutely.
Single payer system is great as long as you don't get old or sick. It's all about rationing because it is run by accountants. It isn't run by doctors. It's run by accountants. And every patient that comes through the door is a financial problem. They're a liability on the system. So you've got a limited budget. Are you going to invest in the old and the incurable? Are you going to invest in 75-year-old cancer patients who will give you no return on your investment, who are only a liability? Or are you going to invest in the young and fit people? This is it. You will not get the same treatment. If you're old, you'll get no treatment. My 85-year-old dad went to the doctor recently in New Zealand. He's paid taxes all his life. He's fit. He's active. He goes fishing. He still goes hunting. The only problem is he's got some shoulder ligament issues that really give him grief. He goes to the doctor and says, "Can I get an operation to fix these?" And they say, "It's a simple operation." They say, "There's absolutely no way. You're 85 years old. They're not going to give you an operation. Here's some painkillers." That is what happens under single-payer health care. That's why Canadians come to America for treatment. That's why, just in Europe, in Britain, in Australia, New Zealand, everybody knows that when you get old, you just don't get treated for certain things. You are just given painkillers and told to go home and die peacefully. And Jon Tester supports this. This is Jon Tester's ideal system. If you want to know what single payer will do for America, there are two places that already have it. One is the Veterans Administration, and the other is the Indian reservations. Is that the kind of health care you want for America? Is that the kind of health care that Jon Tester is promoting?
Right, exactly. And incidentally, Trevor, he was the swing vote that allowed Obamacare to pass. If he had not been elected, it would have failed.
Exactly, and he was elected on a 3,500 vote margin, as you say, which is a very questionable. There's a lot of questions around that margin, but yeah, look, and this is why I think it's imperative for Montanans to get rid of Jon Tester, because you've got very important Supreme Court votes coming up. You imagine if President Trump wants to build his wall again on the Mexican border, he's not going to be able to do it if he doesn't have a reliable majority in the Senate. And right now he has to contend with Republicans like Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins out of Maine, who are basically Democrats in Republican clothing. So it's so vital. One more reliable conservative in the Senate could make a difference in Supreme Court nominations and the abolition of Obamacare and getting the wall built. All of these things could turn on one vote. And I don't think the Montana wants to be the state that destroys President Trump's agenda, because they didn't take the chance to get rid of Jon Tester. And
I agree, Trevor. Let's pick that thought up on the other side of the break, and let's continue with this discussion.
This is The Micro Effect.
The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
Welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Apple, and today on the first segment of our show we have our special guest, Trevor Loudon. Trevor is a New Zealander who has been very involved in the expose of American elected and top appointed officials who are really promoting socialism and communism in the halls of government. And we've had a discussion earlier about Obamacare and about Jon Tester's part in Obamacare. And I want to mention that in Montana right now we are seeing a number of political ads put on by the Tester committees, I guess, or the group supporting him, talking about how Matt Rosendale has promoted the insurance industry in Montana and how the interest rates that he approved this year was a 23% increase. As a former county commissioner, when Obamacare was passed, I have to tell you that some years we saw 35% increases in the price of insurance in Montana, and 23% is probably pretty close to the norm every year increase that we've seen since Obamacare was passed. And to try to make that a campaign issue when, in fact, Jon Tester was the swing vote that allowed Obamacare to pass is pretty astounding. And I have to tell you that before Obamacare was passed, the average increases in the state of Montana were more on the order of somewhere around 8 or 10% per year increase in the cost of health care. So obviously, Obamacare has had a huge impact on the cost of the so-called affordable care that we are getting. And the fact is that the insurance companies have been getting these increases because the costs have gone up so much under Obamacare that there's no way to provide insurance unless we go to a single-payer system. And therein is the whole fly in the ointment, the fact that Obamacare was never designed to succeed. It was designed to fail, and it was designed to fail so that they could force us to take on a single-payer, government-controlled health care system that would be much like that in Cuba or Britain or Canada or any of the socialized countries. Trevor, am I hitting pretty well on the point with that?
Look, absolutely. And I've got video of an academic from Massachusetts called Gerald Friedman, who's a member of the Marxist group Democratic Socialists of America. And it was Democratic Socialists of America that gave you Obamacare. The father of the Obamacare movement was a man called Quentin Young from Chicago. He was a Communist Party member. Then he joined Democratic Socialists of America, and he was Obama's personal physician and political mentor. And he gave Obama the idea. And Friedman, who I'm on tape admitting Obamacare was designed to fail. It could never succeed. The math was wrong. But what it would do would be to destroy the insurance industry and drive up costs so high that the public would cry out for single payer. And that is their next push now, to push single payer on the country. The government pays all of your health care bills, but the catch is they only treat the people they want to treat. So, there's another aspect to it. This is not really about health care. The Communist Party, in its own literature, and the communists who have been pushing this, they harken back to Britain in the 1940s. See, before World War II in Britain, the working class people voted conservative. They voted for the Conservative Party. But after World War II, when they brought in socialised health care, the British working class changed its votes to the Socialist Party. And even though their national health care was terrible, it was the only health care they could get, so they would vote for the party that kept it in. And that is exactly the plan for America. Bring in national socialized health care. The Democrats will support it. Even though it'll be terrible, it'll be all you can get. So they aim to basically control the American voting population by controlling the health care that you get. You do not vote against the party that gives you your health care. Even though it may be terrible, it's all you've got. And that's how they plan to control Americans.
Well, and that, you'd mentioned the rationing of health care, and I do remember, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was one of the architects of Obamacare, talking about how people needed to realize that once you reach 75 years old, it was a good time to die, in essence. And
that was Rahm Emanuel's brother.
Right.
He was one of the,
Right. And so obviously there are many of us who are certainly approaching that age, and there's a growing number of those people and that are in very good health. And obviously there's a problem with that kind of math. If you're in relatively good health and you have some kind of a medical issue and you could live on much longer, I think we have an obligation to take care of our seniors, because they're the ones that have paid to make everything work as long as it has, and we have a let's say obligation as a society to take care of our seniors. It's just that simple.
Well, it's also a great benefit to society, because it's the grandparents that educate the grandchildren in the values and the traditions. They are the bridge to the past. Look, senior citizens are not a liability. They're an asset to society. The only way they are a liability is that they consume a lot of the health care dollar. Now, if they're paying for that themselves or through insurance, there's no problem. If you have a free market system working, you should be getting great health care till you're 98. But if you bring in single-payer health care, I'll tell you straight, it won't be 75. Effectively, you'll start to see a shut-off in care in your 60s, in your retirement. When you retire, that's when your options will narrow. and they will narrow progressively until you die and can be taken off the books and are no longer a liability to the system.
Right, exactly. Well, let's talk a little bit more about some of the progressive agenda of President Barack Obama and how Jon Tester was so supportive of so many of those programs. Things like open borders, things like the cuts in the military that we saw, and many of the things that Jon Tester is now trying to act like he didn't have a part in. He had a very big part in, and Barack Obama, I think his voting record is that he voted with Barack Obama on something like 85 or 90% of the agenda items that Obama wanted. Am I pretty close on that, Trevor?
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right, and we'll talk about the military because I think that this is the key thing. One of Obama's biggest crimes was his gutting of the U.S. military. You know, the military under Obama was the smallest it had been since World War I in some areas. He did more damage to the U.S. military than any other president, more damage than most armies could do. Now, one of the key culprits behind this is an organization called the Council for a Livable World. Now, that was set up in the 1960s by a man called Leo Szilard. Szilard was an identified Soviet spy. He was a communist and an agent of the Soviet Union. And he was a nuclear physicist. He helped to invent the atomic bomb and then campaigned against it. As soon as the Soviets had it, he then campaigned to get it taken off America. And so what he did, he would set up this organization called Council for a Livable World to fund senators in low population states who would vote for U.S. disarmament, who would vote for the gutting of the U.S. military. Now, Jon Tester has been endorsed by that council and financed by that council in this race and also his 2012 race. They said of Tester, the senator voted for the New START Treaty and for the Iran nuclear agreement and has a progressive national security voting record. That means he voted for a treaty that gave Russia tremendous advantage over the United States. He voted for the Iran treaty, which basically gave Iran free hand to develop its nuclear weapons program to the point that they can now threaten the United States and certainly threaten Israel. And a progressive national security voting record means he voted to gut the U.S. military. And he was endorsed by an organization and financed by an organization set up by a Soviet spy. And they endorsed him twice. So any veteran out there, their blood should be boiling that any veteran could ever think of voting for a man like Jon Tester. Anybody who cares about national security in any way should have nothing to do with this individual.
Well, and Trevor, I know that Jon Tester has been on the Veterans Affairs Committee for some time, and I'm not certain, but I believe that he's the chairman of that committee right now. If he isn't, he's the vice chair. And he's constantly talking about how he loves veterans and how he's so concerned for the well-being of the veterans. Let's talk about that.
Well, it's arrant hypocrisy. You know, every Democrat politician understands that Americans honor veterans, that Americans honor the armed services, as they rightly should. So that these far-left Democrats like Kirsten Sinema, who's running the Communist Party supporter, who's running for the Senate in Arizona, they will make a big show about going to Veterans Affairs and shaking hands with veterans and trying to get veterans a few more pennies here and there and trying to sort out the Veterans Administration, which is a total mess. They will make these, it's a show, because they understand that they need to appear patriotic, while at the same time they are voting to gut the U.S. military, so which will invite more war and put more serving military at greater risk. If you go into a war and you're not properly armed and you're not properly financed and you don't have the most up-to-date weapons, your life is more at risk than it needs to be. And those are exactly the policies that Tester has voted for consistently at the behest of an organization set up by a Soviet agent. He has voted consistently to gut the U.S. military. Then he goes to these veterans organizations and tells them how much he loves veterans. Well, that is the epitome of a two-faced politician. You know, Tester has got one of the worst voting records regarding the military in the Senate, yet he makes this big hullabaloo about how he loves veterans. Well, how more hypocritical can you get?
Yeah, that's right. And that, you know, that extends into other things like the open borders policy, which puts our nation certainly at risk. The globalists would love nothing more than to completely end national borders and national sovereignty. And that's an area where Jon Tester has an abysmal record. Am I right with that?
Yeah, he's a complete open borders guy, no border enforcement. But I just want to make a little point there, Dan, and I want listeners to do a little bit of math on this. Now, we look at the lack of border security as a problem because people are coming across, they take American jobs, they're spreading diseases, terrorists come across the border. All of those things are a problem. But that's not the big problem. The big problem is this. Hillary Clinton promised within 100 days of taking office that she was going to amnesty every single illegal immigrant in the country and give them voting rights and citizenship. Now just think what that would mean. There are between 12 and 25 million illegals in the country right now. They vote at least 80% for the Democratic Party, sometimes up to 90%. Now, just do a little bit of math. Mitt Romney, the Republican, in 2012, lost his election by 2.5 million votes. Donald Trump, the Republican, in 2016, won his election by around 200,000 votes. He actually lost the popular vote by over 2 million. So that's how narrow the margins are, 2.5 million votes. Amnesty for illegal immigrants will give the Democrats somewhere between 10 and 20 million new votes. Now you think about that. You think about what California is now turning into under Democratic majority rule. You think of the absolute crazy policies that are being enforced there that are driving Californians into Montana. Now, you apply that logic to the entire country. If the Democrats get in again under President Kamala Harris or President Cory Booker, who they are planning to run, and I tell you, they're going to be the guys, they will give amnesty to all of the illegals. There will never be another Republican administration ever. You will have a one-party state in America from that point in time. And even if you're a traditional Harry Truman, JFK Democrat who loves your country, do you want your party to have complete dominance of this country forever after that point? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. People need to think about the consequences when they cast their vote, because the vote for the Democrats as they currently are, this is not the party of Harry Truman or JFK any longer, a vote for Jon Tester could basically doom America to one-party statehood. And that will have horrible consequences for your liberty, horrible consequences for your children's and grandchildren's future.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Trevor, of course, this is something that you've mentioned in the past when we've spoken, but the truth is that our system, the way it's designed, the way that the new Democratic Party and much of the progressive element of the Republican Party are globalists, and they want to end all national borders, and they want to end the United States of America as a constitutional republic, and we will become a one-world socialist system. And frankly, that is antithetical to our Constitution from top to bottom. And the fact that President Trump was elected because he is a nationalist, because he believes in the American system of free government, of Republican government, and that he believes in national sovereignty, is a reason that the radicals in both parties right now are attacking him so loudly and so viciously. And if we had the Democrats in power, that would be a foregone conclusion. I mean, Hillary Clinton, I think, if she had been elected, we would have seen by now the end of America as we traditionally understood it.
Exactly. And Obama said that the election of President Trump was just a bump on the road, that they would get over that and get back on track to full-on globalism and socialism. Well, we need to make sure that President Trump is not a bump on the road, that he is a new road, that he becomes the road himself to make America truly great again, to bring those taxes down, to build the wall, to rebuild American industry and American sovereignty. We've got a very clear choice coming up in 2018. Because if we blow 2018, we will lose in 2020. If we win in 2018, we will win in 2020.
Absolutely. Trevor, I'm sorry, we're out of time, but I want to tell our listeners you will be on our radio show again in about a month, and when you're in Montana doing your tour of Montana, and also ask our listeners to please go to your website. Trevor, will you give them quickly your website?
Yeah, trevorloudon.com. trevorloudon.com, and the Loudon is spelled Loudon. You can order my books from that site. You can order my movie, The Enemies Within, or you can go to enemieswithinmovie.com. That is a movie that exposes the communists and socialists in your government right now, and it will shock you to the core. I promise you that.
It will. Trevor, thank you for being our guest, and I look forward to you being on again in about a month.
Always a pleasure, Dan, and I always love coming to Montana. It's one of my favorite places.
Well, we'll make sure it's a special trip this time. And
right.
With that, thank you, and we'll go to our commercial break. Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thanks so much, Dan. See you later. Bye.
This is The Micro Effect.
The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
There was a mighty nation, blessed above all of creation. It was a rare and precious pearl, conceived in faith and liberty, home of the brave, land of the free. It was the envy of the world. But this shining city on a hill has turned from the Creator's will and let evil take control. Now the reckless men who lead them want to strip away their freedom and to steal their very soul. Now it's smoke and mirrors, switching baits, criticize and confiscate and let the guilty walk away. In this once righteous, godly nation, in the halls of education, they forbid a child to pray. They say we need to spread the wealth. They pretend to guard the health of the feeble and the poor, while the hand they hold behind their backs confuses and conceals the fact that the wolf is at the door. There's an unseen hand that pulls a string. It makes his little puppets dance to every song he sings as the night rolls in on a rising tide. Look beyond the shadows, behold a pale horse ride.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel, and we, in our second hour, are going to have another terrific guest on the radio show, a gentleman by the name of Chris Kortlander. Before we start the second half of the program, I want to remind our listeners, please support this radio network, support the efforts that we have to expand this network through satellite uplink. We are working aggressively to try to expand the listenership of the Micro Effect Radio Network to be a continent-wide, very wide-reaching radio format that reaches literally every corner of North America, and eventually we want that to also reach into Europe. We have a terrific group of people on this network who are doing radio programming. Following our show today, Monday through Friday, is a gentleman by the name of Jeffrey Bennett, who has a program called Life, Liberty, All That Jazz. Debbie Basigalupi's Radioactive Wednesday is tomorrow morning at the same time that Connecting the Dots is on Tuesdays, but that is a Wednesday show. And we work together to make sure that the programming we have really reflects the things that are going on in this country, and we are here to educate and to communicate with the people of North America. And with that, I want to welcome our guest, Chris Kortlander. Chris is the founding director of the Custer Battlefield Museum and the owner of the historical town of Garryowen, Montana, where the Battle of the Little Bighorn began in 1876. The town is also the host of the tomb of the 7th Cavalry U.S. Unknown Soldier, and he received an award from the governors for this particular tomb and this monument in Garryowen. He's a former law enforcement officer. He's now an outspoken advocate for victims that have been abused and threatened by the Department of the Interior federal law enforcement agents. He's been very involved in a number of different areas, and we're going to talk about his book, Arrow to the Heart, and that book is an expose of some of the government overreach that's gone on in Montana and elsewhere around the country, and some of the actors that have been involved in that. And we also are going to have a terrific little expose of some facts on voting that happened on the Crow Reservation and different Indian reservations around the state of Montana, and I'm sure around the country. But this, in effect, in Montana, allowed Senator Jon Tester to be elected over the incumbent at the time and become the latest U.S. senator that actually was responsible for voting in Obamacare. And so with that, Chris, welcome to the show. And I want you to kind of give our listeners a little bit of an idea of some of the things that you've had to survive through over the last 12 years. Yep, 12 years.
Dan, good morning and greetings from Garryowen, Montana. which was the exact location where the battle began 142 years ago, last June 25th. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm here to talk about my book, Arrow to the Heart, The Last Battle at the Little Bighorn, the Custer Battlefield Museum versus the federal government. My book has a lot of different aspects of information in it. We're going to focus on 2 or 3 of those this morning. But I would like to preface this. Today's 9/11. It was 17 years ago this morning that our World Trade Centers fell in New York City. And I've been listening and watching some programming on that, and it's something that will never be forgotten and we'll never forget. My book is based on a 57-page leaked document that was given to me by somebody inside the federal government. June 25th, I was raided twice by the federal government, once in 2005 and once in 2008, by heavily armed agents of the Bureau of Land Management Law Enforcement Division. They stormed our museum with machine guns and shotguns and surrounded my town with over 20 vehicles, all over a military button. And that button was used for the probable cause on their search warrant. They came to my property and sold me that military uniform button. But I wanted to explain that in this 57-page leaked document that somebody inside the government sent me, and I believe it was authored by an Office of Inspector, an OIG federal agent, Office of Inspector General agent. We formatted, my attorney team and I formatted a report and turned in all the different laws that were broken by the Bureau of Land Management, federal law enforcement agents, and my constitutional guarantees that were compromised during the raid. And I never heard anything back. It was a 50-page submission that we gave to the Department of the Interior Office of Inspector General office. And we never heard anything back. And then 2 years later, I get this 57-page leaked document to me that was very detailed and connecting the Gibson Guitar raid and the Custer Battlefield Museum raid and the Four Corners raid in Blanding, Utah. And the common denominator with all these raids were that the Department of the Interior Bureau of Land Management Law Enforcement Division had too much money in their coffers because they get $256 million every 12 months. And I'm not talking about BLM. BLM gets $1.4 billion. But the Law Enforcement Division of Bureau of Land Management gets $256 million for 211 agents every 12 months. October 31st is the fiscal year of our federal government, and that's when Congress funds the next year. And they were ordered by William Woody, who is the chief of federal law enforcement for the Department of the Interior, to go out and raid high-profile people to get national publicity to justify their appropriations from Congress. Keep in mind that these BLM agents get paid over $100,000 a year. But the reason I brought up and to memorialize 9/11, which is today, the second to the last page in this 57-page leaked document, it reads, "Let us not forget one of our own, Kelvin Smith, who was training terrorists for Ramzi Yousaf." Remember 25 years ago, Ramzi Yousaf was the blind sheriff that was in the New York jail that was ordering, controlling terrorists inside of our countries. And he's the one that attempted to bring down the World Trade Center the first time when they blew up the basement. That was 25 years ago.
Right.
Kelvin Smith was a federal fish and wildlife federal officer who was Muslim, who is Muslim, who was training the terrorists with AK-47s on his ranchette in Pennsylvania while on government time driving a government federal fish and wildlife Suburban, transporting AK-47s to these terrorists and giving them training on his property. and he got caught and got sentenced to 1 year and 1 day in prison.
Wow.
But the reason I'm bringing this up now, not only that this is appropriate because it's the anniversary of 9/11 17 years ago, because we all recall what happened 4 weeks ago in the New Mexico desert, where the Muslim was training 11 children to be school shooters.
Yep, absolutely.
Dan, that was the son of one of the terrorists that Kelvin Smith, the federal agent, was training. Now again, let's connect the dots.
Mm-hmm.
Kelvin Smith is a federal fish and wildlife agent who got caught training Muslim terrorists because he was Muslim with AK-47s 25 years ago. One of the people that was a co-conspirator in that indictment was the father of the individual who just got caught in New Mexico training the 11 children.
That's pretty amazing. And Chris, I have to make this statement too. People, if they do want to connect the dots, need to realize that 9/11 was the basis for the Patriot Act, which greatly expanded the federal ability to overreach and to literally investigate every aspect of our personal lives. And at the same time, the things that are going on with these increases in terrorism and all this stuff, yes, maybe there's an aspect of that that's dealt with the Patriot Act, but the biggest problem with the Patriot Act is it dealt more with the citizens like yourself, with people who are law-abiding normal citizens who lost many of their civil liberties under the Constitution.
You're 100% correct. This definitely ties into the Patriot Act. We didn't know if we were going to be invaded 17 years ago when the World Trade Center went down. George W. was in office. They pushed through the Patriot Act in 3 or 4 weeks. What that did, it gave each one of the secretaries of the president's cabinet a quasi-military police department. So before 9/11, we had 89 sworn federal agents, DEA, U.S. Marshals, FBI. Today, we're approaching 80,000 armed federal agents.
Isn't that amazing?
So all of that got funded through Congress to push through the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act had an expiration clause in it, but it's been renewed and keeps being renewed. When you hire all these federal agents, all the bureaucracy that goes with it, and they go out and buy new houses and new cars and get paid $100,000 a year per agent, it's pretty hard to put that genie back in the bottle. So we get back to William Woody, the head of Bureau of Land Management Law Enforcement, trying to justify everybody's existence. So let's go out and raid U.S. citizens that are taxpayers with no criminal background over nonviolent crimes with machine guns. Let's go through that again. All of the raids I mentioned, the Gibson Guitar raid, Custer Battlefield Museum raid, the Four Corners raid in Blanding, Utah, and there was one other raid in Cody, Wyoming. All of them were involving nonviolent crimes over U.S. citizens that were taxpayers that had no criminal background. So we get the wrath of God coming into our building with M16s or AR-15s or whatever they are pointed to the back of our head. In my specific situation here at Gary Owen, Montana, at the Custer Battlefield, they came in like stormtroopers, and they took down one of my interns in the museum that had a master's degree, spread eagle on the asphalt with an M16 screwed into the back of his skull for 8 minutes. Now, what was this over? This was over a button that they came here. The whole thing's a ruse. It's almost like what's going on with Trump. Trump's not colluding with the Russians. They set him up. And it's the same thing that happened here. The deep state is truly at work, because when they want to justify their existence, they create the atmosphere to go to lie to a federal judge to get them to sign an application for search warrant. Once they have the application for search warrant, that turns into a search warrant. Well, They're hoping once they get into your records, once they get into your building, once they get into your life, they're going to find one thing that they can plead you down on. Does that sound familiar with what's going on with President Trump, with Papadopoulos, and everybody that's getting investigated? They plead him down to something with General Flynn. They plead him down to lying to a federal officer. Has nothing to do with collusion. So the bottom line is, once the federal government has sights on you, they can take you down for no reason. In my specific case, I was never indicted, and I was never charged with the crime. But I spent nearly $400,000 on attorneys because we had to fend them off. Every month, my attorney got a phone call that said, the grand jury's convening on the third Thursday of every month, and unless Chris Kortlander pleads to one of these felonies, we're going to charge him with more felonies. So I went through this pressure for 4 years and 8 months. Once you're raided, they have 5 years to charge you with a crime. I got a closure letter from the U.S. Attorney's Office stating that no charges were going to be filed, and my case was closed 4 years and 8 months into this fiasco. But during that time, I couldn't do anything except thinking that I was going to be indicted and I was going to go to prison. I was going to forfeit my town, the property, the museum collection, and you can go on and on and on. I was one of the fortunate ones. Now, I keep bringing up the Gibson guitar raid. Many of your listeners may remember about 7 or 8 years ago, they got swarmed twice by federal fish and wildlife agents. And at the time, William Woody was the head of federal fish and wildlife. And they came into Gibson guitar with machine guns. Over what? Because they were importing exotic ebony wood for their fingerboards on the guitars. That's right. They got raided by a SWAT team with machine guns from Federal Fish and Wildlife because they were importing pallets of wood from Bangladesh for their fingerboards on the Gibson guitars. So they were being investigated for violations of the Lacey Act. And the Lacey Act was put into play in 1988, and basically the enforcement of the Lacey Act was given to the Federal Fish and Wildlife. And the gist of the Lacey Act is that exotic wood from rainforests around the world needs to be, when exported from that country, the wood needs to be worked. In other words, it needs to be sanded or it needs to be cut. They wanted to give some of the labor back to the exporting country so they could benefit from the wood as well. Well, in the Gibson guitar raid, what was the reason for the application for search warrant? Bangladesh government signed off on the export that the wood was worked, it was sanded. But when it got to the United States, Federal Fish and Wildlife decided that the wood was not sanded enough. I know that sounds outrageous, but that's what it said on the application for search warrant, that the wood wasn't sanded enough. So they signed a search warrant to go into the Gibson Guitar Factory in Nashville, Tennessee, and raid them twice with automatic weapons over exotic wood.
That's outrageous, and I know that the raids in the Four Corner area of Utah, I've read about that as well, and that was kind of a set-up deal. They had an inside guy who really set up those local citizens. It's always about some kind of an artifact, and that's what the button was in your case. It was a claim of a military button that was dug up at the site of the battle, and in fact the buttons that you had weren't from the battle site at all, where they were from the same era but from other areas. Am I right about that?
That's correct. Let's get into what happens during when you're raided by the Department of the Interior law enforcement from the Federal Fish and Wildlife, which were also on my raid team here at Gary Owen, or the Bureau of Land Management law enforcement. They come in here to intimidate you so you melt and that you're going to plead guilty. They tell you that you're going to go to prison for the rest of your life, you're going to forfeit your property, you're going to be a convicted felon, and you're not going to have a life again. In my case, they threatened me with 89 years in federal prison, and they gave me a draft indictment in writing that said I was going to be charged with 9 different felonies, which would give me 89 years in prison. And during that 4 years and 8 months, it went from 9 felonies to 8 felonies to 6 felonies to 5 felonies, all the way down to 1 felony. We kept telling the United States Attorney's Office, go ahead and charge us because we want to go to court. Keep in mind that everybody has the right for a speedy trial, but since I was never charged with the crime, I was persecuted for 4 years and 8 months, never prosecuted. So the speedy clock, the clock never began on me, because it doesn't begin until the indictment or until you're arrested or charged with the crime. So in my case, they figured out they were going to persecute me and try to destroy me financially because they didn't have a case on me and I was fighting back. I'm the only person out of 42 people involved with the Gibson Guitar Raid, the Custer Battlefield Museum Raid, the Blanding Raid in Utah, and the Cody, Wyoming Raid that did not plead guilty, did not get indicted, did not get arrested, did not turn into a confidential informant, did not forfeit any property, and that did not commit suicide. And now we're going to talk about the people that took their own lives because of the wrath of the federal government, BLM, unchecked, deep state law enforcement. When they come in to raid you and they point a gun at your head, and I'm not making this up, when they screw a barrel in the back of your head and they talk to you like you're a terrorist, and they spend 11 hours with you, and they keep repeating that you're the scum of the earth. In my case, I had some bones when I built the museum 25 years ago here on the battlefield. I found some bones during construction. So what did I do? I turned them into the Park Service archaeologist, and he determined that they were sheep bones and buffalo bones, and they were not human remains. And I had them kept in our vault here at the museum. And when I was raided, one of the federal fish and wildlife agents, Doug Gossman, who is now retired, he held them 3 inches from my nose and said, "These are little girl bones. Where is she buried?" And he kept waving them in front of my face within 3 inches of my nose while I'm surrounded by federal agents. And he kept screaming at me, "These are little girl bones. Where is she buried?" And all I could think is, oh my God, my federal government is inside my building, and they're going to frame me with murder for some reason. I mean, I didn't even know what they were talking about. I just couldn't believe it. But what they do is they use this type of psychological verbal abuse on you to break you down. So they'll turn you into a confidential informant, or they will have you plead to a lesser crime so they can get a chalk mark on the blackboard saying they got another conviction. That's really all they're after. It's very embarrassing for the U.S. Attorney's Office to be involved in a search warrant that they don't get a conviction or somebody to plead guilty of. So in Blanding, Utah, when they raided 24 homes one morning at 6 o'clock in the morning with over 200 federal armed agents over Indian artifacts, 3 people ended up committing suicide. I've got really close to the Red family. Dr. Red, who was a Mormon doctor, 68 years old, months away from retirement, delivered over 3,800 babies in his career, was a community doctor. He worked out of his car going from a small community to small community his whole career. They raided his home and danced over 180 armed federal agents into his home, and they arrested him. And I won't go into there's just some unbelievable details with what happened during his arrest. But when he bonded out that evening, he went down to a pond on his property and he killed himself. And then a school teacher killed himself about 2 or 3 weeks later. And then the confidential informant that the BLM paid over $500,000 to, who was a convicted drug user and drug addict and a felon. That's right, they gave him $500,000 to set all these people up. He ended up killing himself the day before the first federal trial on one of the 24 people that got arrested that day. So my question is, Dan, why do we have a federal law enforcement agency policing U.S. citizens that have no criminal background over nonviolent crimes with machine guns? And why are we funding them with millions and millions of dollars? Keep in mind, again, BLM, 211 law enforcement agents, they get $250 million every 12 months.
Yep, absolutely. And we have turned into, whether we like it or not, and obviously we don't like it, we've turned into a police state, because those same people prior to the 1990s, prior to Bill Clinton's Office of Sustainable Development and adoption of those policies, prior to that, they were the servants of the people, and after the President's Council on Sustainable Development, they became, the environment became the master, and the citizens became the subordinate. And that's just the way it works.
It's just amazing how the federal government is so out of control in the deep state. A lot of people think that that term's used very loosely, but the deep state, obviously, look what's going on with D.C. and our president right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, we're going to move into a commercial break. I can hear the music coming, but let's pick that up on the other side of the break, because your message to America is so very, very vital that our listeners understand, and I do want to get into Jon Tester as well.
Yes, we will.
They say we need to spread the wealth. They pretend to guard the health of
Welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel, and our second guest today on the radio program is Mr. Chris Kortlander, and I want to mention the fact that Arrow to the Heart, The Last Battle of the Little Bighorn, the book that Chris has written, it's an excellent read. It is it reads very much like a mystery novel, and the foreword to that book was written by Ammon Bundy. And, of course, Ammon is someone who we're all very familiar with. We've had a number of radio programs on the Hammonds, on the Malheur tragedy with Lavoy Finicum, and we've had a number of programs with John Lamb talking about the trials of the Bundys in Las Vegas, and this is something that Chris, you talk about in your book and in your background, is the overreach by our federal land agencies and how they have literally turned into a police state, and how they are doing things against the best interests of America in a way that very few people could ever have imagined even a matter of 15, 20 years ago.
That's correct. Back in the 80s, Bureau of Land Management, I think they started off with 8 rangers, and they were unarmed at the time. And then they ended up giving them 38 Smith & Wesson revolvers, and that has turned into this $250 million quasi-federal police department to police U.S. citizens. The overzealous federal agents that are in the Bureau of Land Management, they should get laterally transferred to our Border Patrol, and they should be using their energy to keep our enemies outside of our United States of America. ICE arrested over 110,000 illegal aliens last year that had criminal background. So why are we having this $250 million federal police department policing U.S. citizens? It's absolutely,
it's insane,
it's
Chris. It's insane. It's the deep state, and the fact that instead of concentrating on utilizing the forces we have to protect our people, the fact that now the radical left are trying to get rid of ICE and really trying to end President Trump's attempts to make sure that we have secure borders.
That's correct. If they want to focus and get rid on an agency, they should get rid of the Bureau of Land Management, make it a civil division. You know, what happened to me in Four Corners raid and the Gibson Guitar raid, it could all have been done civilly. They could have issued me a federal civil summons to federal court. If I don't respond and don't go to court, then the judge issues a contempt warrant. A U.S. Marshal comes out and gets you and brings you to federal court. Why do we need to be approached with machine guns? It's absolutely absurd.
Well, and you're a former deputy sheriff. You're former law enforcement yourself.
Yes, and I actually ran for county sheriff here. I mean, I don't even have a speeding ticket, so why would they come to a museum with machine guns? So I just want to mention one more atrocity that happened, and then we'll move on to Tester and election fraud. Cody, Wyoming, 19 months ago, Robert Weaver in Cody, Wyoming, was raided by Bureau of Land Management agents after I wrote my book, where actually it was the last day, I believe. I made a mention of it in my book, but it was towards the end of the book. I couldn't believe that the Bureau of Land Management raided another person, and that person ended up committing suicide. So that was number 4 that committed suicide subsequent of being raided and questioned by the Bureau of Land Management. I mean, do we ever hear about people that are raided from the DEA committing suicide, or people that are being raided by the FBI committing suicide? But we got 4 suicides, 4 dead bodies from the Bureau of Land Management that are responsible for those people taking their own lives because of the way that they're treated. And it just is amazing to me that this still is ongoing today. And one of the perpetrators, the main perpetrator of this, and I'm going to name him by name, and I did in my book, is Daniel Love. Daniel Love was the head of the Bureau of Land Management Law Enforcement Division for this region, and he is the one that recently got fired, or I shouldn't say fired, he was demoted from the Bureau of Land Management Law Enforcement Agency, and he's the one that berated Dr. Red that day, and he was caught a year later taking some of Dr. Red's collection that his widow forfeited to the federal government, and he was caught with some of that collection in his personal possession. He was also caught going into the federal locker in Salt Lake City and picking up artifacts out of the federal evidence locker and giving those away to other people in the Bureau of Land Management as war trophies. He was recently caught with a kill book and a suicide list. That's right. Our federal agent, law enforcement, was caught with a kill book, and we have 4 dead bodies. And to your listening audience, just simply, if you want to read more about Dan Love and the kill book, simply just Google it. Dan Love, kill book, BLM, and you can read all about it. There's numerous articles in numerous newspapers. And we just recently found out that Dan Love, we heard, it's unconfirmed, but he just was giving a full medical federal retirement, which would give him his salary for the rest of his life and permission to carry a federal firearm because he would be a retired on medical leave from the BLM law enforcement. As far as I'm concerned, he should be investigated and he should be prosecuted for the wrongdoings that he did against our U.S. citizens. And again, all of this could be more information on the book would be arrowtotheheartbook.com, arrowtotheheartbook.com, and you can read more information. I have a lot of other information, including the 57-page leaked document is on my website, arrowtotheheartbook.com. Now, Dan, let's move on to the voter fraud chapter 7. I am located on...
One thing I want to mention before we leave this subject, because it is important, that Dr. Red, who committed suicide and was a local, very popular doctor, had never, ever been involved in the trading of Indian artifacts, and in fact, his wife was a collector, and Dr. Red wasn't even very interested in that subject and was almost totally removed from it. And these kill books and these suicide lists that Dan Love had kind of remind me, and I'm going to reach back a little bit, but Lon Horiochi, the guy that killed Vicki Weaver in Idaho, who got promoted and ended up being one of the top guys in the FBI after an openly and blatant murder of a very innocent woman standing in her own doorway. So let's go on to Senator Tester, because I'm getting mad.
Okay, well, one thing I just want to follow up on the Weaver statement. That's one thing that federal law enforcement does. When a federal law enforcement agent gets in trouble or being questioned by the public, or we want to shed sunlight on a situation, what they do is they laterally transfer them to another federal agency and give them a promotion.
Right. Right, exactly. Okay, let's move on to Senator Tester, because that's an interesting subject, and I think you really need to provide information on that.
Sure. Our museum is located on the Crow Reservation, which is a non-public law 280 reservation. And if someone wants to know more about non-public law 280 reservations, there's a Wikipedia page on it. But basically what that means is that state law does not apply on this reservation. That state law, criminal and civil provisions, state code does not apply to non-Native, does not apply to enrolled Native Americans inside the exterior boundaries of the reservation. So we have polling precincts here on the reservation. And when the ballot boxes are not controlled by state law, it welcomes voter fraud, because there's no law to guarantee the sanctity of the vote of the polling place. Senator Tester knew this, and he sent his people down here to give $40 checks to Crow Indians to vote for him, and the people that he sent here were within 30 feet of the front door of the polling place. And why do I know this? Number one, I saw them there, and number two, the next day I had Crow Indians coming to my business and cashing the checks. And I thought, what is this, Democratic Party of Montana, Jon Tester? And after me cashing these $40 checks 1 and 2 times, I thought, I'm going to photocopy these. Something's wrong with this. So I ended up photocopying the checks before I cashed them. And what happened was Senator Tester was able to turn the scale in the U.S. Senate from Republican to Democrat, because it just so happened that the Crow Agency precinct and the state of Montana were the last to report for that election. Again, we say that every vote counts. I think that Tester won by less than 3,000 votes, and it was the Crow Agency precinct that tipped the scales in the national election. Now, why are we talking about this today? Because Senator Tester is running for re-election in November. He's the one that's responsible for getting in and for voting for Obamacare. I went to him during my raids and asked his office to intervene and get involved. Of course, received no help. So now that he's running for re-election this November, and President Trump just came to Billings last week to basically talk about Tester. Tester is the one that came out against President Trump when President Trump nominated his two-star admiral physician to head the VA. And Tester, thinking it was going to be politically correct and gather votes for him, he came out and said that the physician that Trump nominated was basically writing prescriptions to anybody in the White House, which was totally false. And after him being berated by Senator Tester, he eventually withdrew his nomination. So getting back to the Senator Tester voting fraud, this happened in 2006. I have the evidence. It's Chapter 7 in my book. We had a candidate for a Senate office that came down here, broke campaign laws on the reservation to get votes, and that actually was successful for him because he got in by a very narrow margin. He beat Senator Burns by a few thousand votes, and it all had to do with the precinct here in Crow Agency.
Well, the fact that you have copies of the canceled checks, and this was something that was pretty much reservation-wide, this was going on in all the polling precincts, pretty much reservation-wide. Am I right?
Well, all I can report to is the one that I have factual basis of. We can assume it's happening at the other polling places on the reservation, and there's a whole story in my book regarding reservations and how the parties try to control the votes of the Indians, because in a tight election, it is the Native American vote that's a swing vote for the nation. But shame on Senator Tester. And then when he's approached on this and talks about it, of course he knows nothing.
Yeah. Well, also, I think Governor Schweitzer, who is a friend of Jon Tester, kind of bragged on how they had turned the election around and how they had stolen the election by what had happened on the reservation. Am I right on that? I saw something about that.
Yes, absolutely. He went on the record and he gave a speech about it. And then after he was questioned and the media went unglued on that, of course he walked back his statements and he said he was just joking. But yeah, he gave a speech that basically it was that reason that they won the election. So he backed up the claims. He backed up the claim in the book. So I just wanted to mention to your listening audience, Arrow to the Heart book, The Last Battle at the Little Bighorn. Last week was number 37 under Crimes and Corruption, Government Nonfiction on Amazon. So it's getting a good read. We got a copy to Secretary Zinke, who is the Secretary of the Interior, and we got a personal copy to Congressman Giaforte, who is now the chairman of the Oversight Committee of the Department of the Interior and the BLM. So right now we have all the stars lined up. We have a Montana Secretary of the Interior, who's a former Navy SEAL Team 6 commander, and we have Greg Giaforte, who is now our congressman, who is now chairman of the Oversight Committee with subpoena power over the Department of the Interior and the Bureau of Land Management. They're both reading my book. They both sent me a letter thanking me for that. Hopefully, all the stars will line up. We'll get a congressional hearing. I've already testified twice in front of Congress about this, but we're still pushing it because right now, William Woody, who is in charge of the Bureau of Land Management, is still in charge of the Department of the Interior, federal law enforcement, and he's the one that's responsible, along with Daniel Love, for the suicides end the deaths of these innocent United States patriots that had no criminal background that were being investigated over nonviolent crimes.
Well, and I think it's really important that our listeners understand how incredibly important it is for them to get involved, to get active, to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And for God's sake, get out and vote. This is the most important election that you can possibly imagine. And if the Republicans, and especially the real small R Republicans, don't stay in power, we are going to see a situation that will be almost unbearable in this country. And President Trump, with all the momentum that he has gained to take our country back and make America great again, will be lost if we don't win this midterm election.
Amen. It couldn't have been said any better than that, Dan. We really have to get out and vote. You just need to tell all your friends and all your family members that we need to get out and vote this November. If we lose this election, we're going to be in big trouble. One other thing, Dan, I just wanted to mention that Jason Chaffetz, the former congressman from Utah, where the BLM raid took place inside the state of Utah, in Blanding, Utah, he proposed and authored a bill, H.R. 622, to demilitarize the Bureau of Land Management. So it's just not you and me and other patriots talking about defanging the Bureau of Land Management law enforcement. We have a former congressman that entered a bill, which is still alive today, that has co-sponsors on it to demilitarize the Bureau of Land Management. That basically means to take their guns away, to defund the Bureau of Land Management law enforcement division and make it back into a civil division. So I just want to let you know, with Congressman Giaforte in place, with H.R. 622, it is possible, but we need involvement. We need your listeners to understand that they need to take action. We need to save our country. We need for the law enforcement to go back to the county sheriffs, and the county sheriffs are the chief law enforcement officer of every county inside the United States, not the federal government. Keep in mind, when we have a federal election, Dan, it's 50 states. It's 50 United States of America. The federal government does not run elections. It's each one of the Secretary of States of our 50 states that make up our union that run the federal election. So the chief law enforcement officer of every county is the county sheriff. The power needs to go back to the county sheriff, and that's exactly what's written in the bill, H.R. 622, that's sponsored and authored by Jason Chaffetz, which he is now a Fox News contributor.
Mm-hmm. And I want to remind our listeners that return of the power to the county sheriffs and, frankly, to county commissioners as administrators is what our system of government was always intended to be. And this shift that we've seen to add more power to the national or to the federal government and take away power from local and state governments is exactly the opposite of what our founding fathers intended. And it's the reason that we have lost so much of our liberty and so many of our powers as citizens have gone into a system that is literally sucking the blood from America right now.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important that we're involved. You and me, your listening audience, the people that make up our great country. And thank God we have President Trump in charge. Hopefully that we'll get through all of this collusion crap that's going on in D.C. and we can take care of business. But again, Congressman Giaforte from Montana is the new chairman of the Oversight Committee for the Department of the Interior. I can't stress how important and how lucky we are that the stars are lining up for us to make a change. Again, please get out and vote in November. It's so important.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, first of all, I want to make sure that you are aware that I'd love to have you back again before the election, and we can do another show on this subject, because obviously this is near and dear to me and to most of my listeners, the fact that we are losing our country to forces that want nothing good to happen to America. These are people that want to see global government, and they want to see global government under a socialist Marxist model that would end America as we know it. And so I welcome you back to the radio program. Possibly we can do this again before the election, and I think that's really important because your comments are extremely important to our listeners. And I want to give you an opportunity to do a little bit of a quick wrap-up and give our listeners more information on how they can get your book and how they can get more information on you and the programs that you're working on.
Sure. Thank you, Dan, and thank you again for the opportunity to come on your great show and talk to your listeners. Again, the name of the book is Arrow to the Heart, The Last Battle at the Little Bighorn. My name is Chris Kortlander. My last name is spelled with a K, Chris Kortlander. My website is arrowtotheheartbook.com, arrowtotheheartbook.com, where you can go and you can click on the news links and read more about what Dan and I spoke about this morning regarding our book. This is an important story that needs to get out. Please tell your friends more about it. You can also purchase the book on Amazon, and if you go Arrow to the Heart Book on Amazon, please look at the reviews. We have a 5-star review on Amazon. And again, Dan, thank you so much for having me on your great show.
Well, thank you, Chris, and I look forward to the next time we have you on, and maybe next time we can get Ammon Bundy on with you, and we can have another great show. Thank you for being our guest.